Good morning, everyone. I'm really sorry, my voice is, I lost it just a few hours ago. And so I think I won't be able to talk much, but we have Mr. Rajmohan Gandhi with us. And indeed a pleasure and a privilege for me, particularly because this is a great moment. His book, recent book on the Punjab, a history from Aurangzeb to Mountbatten. That
he is speaking into the mic, but he also apologizes because he has a throat situation. So kindly bear with him, but I would request him to speak into the mic as closely as possible.
Okay. Is it better now? Okay, my apologies. So this is a very interesting, valuable addition to the history of South Asia. Not much has been said on this nearly 3 centuries of the Punjab. And Mr. Gandhi has, of course, ventured to set out and record some of the great historical moments as well as trends, particularly the decline of Mughal Empire in the 18th century and the way it all led into the creation of British Empire and the extension of British Raj in the Punjab, followed by the withdrawal of another empire in the early 20th century, and what happened thereafter, and which defines much of what happens in Pakistan as well as to a great extent in India. So without further ado and fail, I would like Mr. Gandhi to tell us a bit more about the book, Why Punjab, and how this book evolved as a subject.
Thank you, Raza, very much, and thank you for moderating this conversation and this discussion on this book. As I said yesterday, I am truly glad and impressed that the people of Karachi are so enthusiastic about a book on Punjab that I've written. I appreciate that. People speak about the division of India of 1947, correctly so. But the division of India was above all the division of Bengal and Punjab. Sindh was not divided, Balochistan was not divided, Frontier province was not divided, UP was not divided, Bombay presidency was not divided. The only 2 places that were divided were Bengal and Punjab. And in 1947, the great killings that took place, sadly, in Punjab exceeded the killings in Bengal by a very large number. I was born and raised in Delhi, where I was going to school, and as I mentioned yesterday, my school was transformed from one day to the next. There were Muslim boys, a few of them in my school in Delhi, and suddenly they vanished. And lots of Punjabi boys, Hindus and Sikhs from West Punjab came to my school. So there was a transformation. Even in my young life, I was a boy, I was 10, 11, 12 when these things happened. And as many here may know, that from 1858 to 1911, Delhi was administered by the British from Lahore. Delhi was part of the Punjab administration. So even before Delhi was transformed into something like a Punjabi city after 47, Delhi was intimately connected with Punjab. And then, among the great numbers killed in Punjab, in 47, both sides of Punjab, or rather, linked to those killings in Punjab was also the assassination of my grandfather. So, Punjab, therefore, became very much a part of my life, part of my being, you might say, that as I grew up. So if I wanted to understand the pain of the subcontinent, if I wanted to understand the story of my subcontinent, I had to understand the story of Punjab, which is what impelled me to do this. Now, although I again myself start with the great trauma of 47, I want to emphasize and underline that this book is not primarily or exclusively about partition. As Raza has mentioned, this is a story of 240 years. From the end of one great empire, the Mughal Empire, to the end of the British Empire. Now, technically, the Mughal Empire continued till 1857, but most historians agree that with the death of Aurangzeb in 1707, the great period of the Mughal Empire came to an end, and the Mughal Empire was in decline thereafter. So it is the story of the 18th century, which was a story of some kind of a vacuum in Punjab. Why this vacuum was filled not by Punjab's Muslim majority, but by Punjab's Sikh minority is one of the questions that I try to address. The 18th century saw the invasions of Nadir Shah, also of Ahmad Shah Abdali, Ahmad Shah Durrani. And eventually the Sikh kingdom came into being. And then in the 1840s, the Sikh kingdom lost to the British. Roughly 50 years, the Sikh kingdom lasted, Ranjit Singh and his successors. And from 1846 to 1947, British rule over Punjab lasted almost exactly 100 years. So it is these three different phases: the pre-Sikh time of the 18th century, the Sikh kingdom of 50 years, and the British rule of nearly 100 years. That is the range that this book covers.
So, would you like to elaborate how come the Sikh empire emerged out of nowhere, virtually, and captured power and ruled for so long, almost 90 years or so?
Yes. They ruled for about, direct rule of the Sikh kingdom for about 50 years, and before that for 30 years, different Sikh leaders were in control of Lahore 30 years before Ranjit Singh took over. So this is a question that I try to ask, that after all there was a large Muslim majority all across Punjab. There were several Muslim clans and Muslim tribes in different parts of Punjab. There were Muslim rulers in different pockets of Punjab. They were not all Punjabi-speaking rulers.
Right.
Some of them were Pashtun-speaking rulers also. But they had become Punjabis over time. So I find in my study that compared with the Sikh motivation or desire to run Punjab, the Muslims of Punjab did not seem to have that motivation. Also, yes, religion was important to both groups. But partly because, and this is partly speculation, but partly because the Sikh religion came across to the Sikhs in the Punjabi language, that also made for a deeper bond between the average Sikh peasant soldier and his religion than was necessarily the case with many Muslims of Punjab. That is a factor, who also were deeply religious, but religion was not part of their daily speech, their daily conversation in their language. As for the motivation, you know, the killing of Guru Gobind Singh's boys, that was a profound event in the story of the Sikh community of Punjab, and that gave them a very strong motivation to do something against the Mughal Empire and the Mughal Empire's officers in Punjab. And that then grew into a very powerful movement for Sikh control over Punjab. So these were some of the factors.
And how was the Sikh rule towards Muslims? Because in Pakistan, we have a very sort of doctored notion that it was an oppressive rule for Muslims, and it's also termed as the Sikha Shahi in common parlance.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So now, obviously, I also want to state, by the way, that I did not try to write this book to establish any point or to disprove any point. My aim was to try and find out what happened, how it happened, why it happened. Not to pronounce any verdict, कि इन्होंने अच्छा काम किया, इन्होंने बुरा काम किया. But I will try to answer what I found. I found that there was indeed a rule that was something like a Sikh or Hindu rule during Ranjit Singh's time.
Right.
By the way, it's important to recognize that although in subsequent years the Hindu-Sikh differences have been greatly emphasized, understandably so, during Ranjit Singh's time, his kingdom was referred to by the foreign visitors as a Hindu kingdom. They did not call it the Sikh kingdom. But nonetheless, the Guru Granth Sahib and other emblems of the Sikh faith were quite evident when Ranjit Singh was the Maharaja. And there were two noticeable restrictions in Punjab on the Muslim community. One was that the azan was not permitted.
Right.
And secondly, there could be no slaughter of cows. Now, these two restrictions were not always strictly enforced, and in some places where Muslims were in a large majority, they could not be enforced. It's also true that Ranjit Singh ruled much of Punjab, sometimes directly, but sometimes through vassals, and he gave his Muslim chiefs also considerable autonomy in their different pockets of Punjab. These were undoubted restrictions. But it is also true that there were a great many Muslim officers in his army. He had Muslim ministers, he had Muslim advisors. The Fakir brothers are very well known, of course, who were among them. It's also important that some of the leaders in later decades during British time of Punjab, Muslim leaders of Punjab, like Mian Sar Fazli Hussain, who became such a powerful leader of Punjab, and Khizr Hayat Timana, the forebears of these people were all allies or officers in Ranjit Singh's government. So if Ranjit Singh's government had really been totally hostile to the Muslims, the descendants of these Muslim figures would not have become so prominent figures in the story of... And there are other evidences also from many visitors, European visitors, that they found that Muslims enjoyed a reasonable kind of opportunity to worship the way they wanted, to live the way they wanted. So it isn't as if it was wonderfully tolerant in that Muslims were given equal rights. That is not correct. Nor can it be said that it was an oppressive rule against the Muslims.
Thank you for putting it straight as it was. Would you like to read something before we move on to the next century?
Yes, I would like, if I'm allowed, to read something about that 18th century period, which was a period of great turbulence and great strife. And all of you are perhaps aware of this. But, Heer Ranja, Waris Shah, Bulle Shah, also part of the story. So, one question people ask is, how come that during this period of great turbulence, great wars, fighting different parts of... now, this fighting was chiefly between some of the Sikh leaders and the Afghans. It was not necessarily a fight between Sikh leaders and Muslim Punjabis. So this too is worth knowing. However, how come that this great poetry was written during this turbulent period? So this is just a couple of paragraphs about Waris Shah. Heer was turned to and clung to as knowledge of the violence, as distinct from the violence itself, spread to every corner of Punjab. Indeed, Waris himself appears to have recited it to huge, spellbound audiences. We can believe that the common people of Punjab identified with Heer and Ranja, whose background was similar to theirs. Through the dice of war or fate, ordinary Punjabis were losing lives or losing loved ones. Through Heer, where love was stolen by fate, they felt closer also to those from whom love was stolen by war. While Heer's long lament, to which Waris had given eloquent tongue, found an echo in the hearts of many 18th century Punjabis, domination and consequent exile, two of the threads that run through Heer, were part of the daily experience of many Punjabis, whether Muslim, Hindu or Sikh. They responded to a passionate, sensitive and resourceful Punjabi girl like Heer, who stood up to patriarchs and bigots. Then there is this comment by a writer there, that these stories like Heer, and there were other qissas like Heer that were popular, none of them contained an iota of communal bias or antagonism. Despite the clashes we've been recording, amity among Hindus, Muslims and Sikhs subsisted in the 18th century of Punjab. If, therefore, we wish to imagine Punjab as it was during the last 4 decades of the 18th century, we can, among other things, picture to ourselves a large rural audience listening to Waris Shah himself, a laughing and crying audience of Muslims, Sikhs and Hindus, even perhaps including to one side a knot of women. Galloping horses and falling bodies should not be allowed to fill our entire mental screen. If there was war in Punjab, there was also peace.
Great, thank you. And with this fall of the Sikh rule and the entry of the British and annexation of the Punjab in 1849, what were then the transformations that the region underwent, which would then lead to a new society, a new aristocracy, and leading to more communal tensions displayed and evidenced in the early 20th century then?
Yes, now the story of imperial rule in Punjab is a fascinating story. There's no doubt that British rule achieved remarkable things, in some cases astonishing things all across Punjab. There was the army that was recruited. Many Punjabi Muslims, Punjabi Sikhs, a smaller percentage of Punjabi Hindus entered the British army in India, the subcontinent, and over half of the subcontinent soldiers in World War I and World War II were from Punjab. Yeah. Subcontinent was vast, but more than half the soldiers came from Punjab. Already in the last 2 days, I met several people, and of course the same happened even more so in Lahore. So many people who have had not only parents but grandparents in the army. So this was a very big part. Of course, there were the canals. And there was quite remarkable rule in the districts of Punjab. So with all our passion against imperial rule and our love of the independence movement, I find in my study that there is so much that one can appreciate and respect also. Yet, there were two things that marred this impressive picture, that were black marks on this impressive picture. One was that there was a clear, understood, underlined part of British rule, that the ruling race would be a superior race and the ruled race would be an inferior race. This was absolutely underlined. So it was from a position of superiority and in some cases of arrogance, in some cases of cruel arrogance, that this, in many ways, impressive rule was achieved. That is one black mark. The other black mark was that even in the army, also in other parts of life in Punjab, the British were successful in creating special relationships with each of the three groups, with the elites and the leaders of each of the three groups. There was a wonderful relationship between the British and the Hindu leaders. Wonderful pathway between the British and the Sikh leaders. Wonderful approaches between the Muslim elites of Punjab and the British, but very thick walls between the Hindus and the Muslims and the Sikhs. So this was the imperial architecture. And the whole development of the army was also based on this separation. Yes, the British had made the Punjabi soldier the agent of the empire in every village. And yet, not only was no effort made to develop more contacts, cooperation, even partnership between Muslims, Sikhs and Hindus, not only was no effort made, an effort was made indeed to keep them divided. And the great tragedy of British success, you might say, in Punjab, was this, that when the biggest test of the empire came in the summer of 47, when the empire was about to leave, and there was this great and immense army that had been raised. Most of it was in Punjab. But this large army in Punjab was absolutely unused and in fact powerless to control the killings.
Yes.
Now, the British Army had been used in the 42 movement against Quit India. Some of you will know that in the early part of 1946, there was the naval mutiny in Karachi and in Bombay. And the British Army had been quick to suppress it and successful in suppressing it within days. But when the biggest challenge came in the summer of 46, of course the killing started in Punjab in March of 47, beg your pardon, summer of 47. March of 47, the killings had started in Multan and Rawalpindi. And then they spread. But when the greatest challenge came, this army was thought to be so communal that it could not be trusted to control the riots. But also the British had said, we are now leaving. अब जिम्मेदारी आप लोगों की है. आपने कहा था कि जाओ, हम जा रहे हैं, अब आप संभालिएगा. And so that was the great tragedy of this divide and rule, sadly.
Yet you write in the book that with all this imperial project, the communal amity between people at the ordinary level continued.
Yes.
It was not affected majorly because of this whole shared Sufi thought and common practices, cultural practices. So what was going on? I mean, what happened if we come to 47 and the rioting that we saw and the kind of sort of undermining of insaniyat or humanity, as you put it in your book, that came through. So what was going on?
Well, this, of course, is a profoundly important and not a question that can't be answered in just a few crisp sentences, that ye hua, ye nahi hua, but I will try to offer my understanding such as it is, and I'm sure it's very incomplete. One thing to recognize is that in addition to this amazing coexistence that continued in Punjab for a very, very long time, yes, clashes took place, wars took place, but as far as the vast majority of the people of Punjab were concerned, at ground level, there was, if not very deep interrelationship, there was certainly interdependence in many ways, there was peaceful coexistence in many ways, and there was some participation in each other's life. By and large, both Insaniyat and Punjabiyat, above all reinforced by the common Punjabi language, these two forces were extremely powerful. But simultaneously, we should recognize that among the elites, there was a very major ideological rift. Because one section of the elites, the Hindu elites, had this very deep belief in the purity of birth. Some are born in particular castes, and therefore they have a higher degree of purity. And to maintain our purity, we must not touch or allow ourselves to be touched by those who have not had the privilege of being born into pure families. So this notion of pollution, of purity of birth, was a very strong notion, and obviously it caused a great deal of unhappiness, in many cases resentment, understandable resentment among a large number of Muslims. But equally, on the Muslim side, among the elites, there was this notion not of purity of birth, but of purity of belief, that we have a pure religion. You may think that we are not so lucky as to be born in a pure family, but we think you are not so lucky because your beliefs are so impure. So purity of belief clashed with purity of birth. You are a lesser breed, said some. You are a lesser creed, said others. But the amazing thing about the people of Punjab was that they were able to put aside this ideological clash.
This is exactly what you write. Yeah.
This is the remarkable reality about Punjab. And if I may continue on to the 47 killings, which of course were terrible, but one important finding of my research, which is offered in this book, is this: that the Punjabis who in that season of madness killed other Punjabis were greatly outnumbered by Punjabis who protected other Punjabis. So Punjabiyat and Punjabi Insaniyat overcame even this madness, this poison, in that terrible summer and autumn of 1947.
Would you like to read something
Okay. Nadir Shah, when he invaded northern subcontinent, one of the things he took back with him was the Kohinoor. And then this Kohinoor diamond came into the hands of Ahmad Shah Abdali. And then eventually Ranjit Singh was successful in obtaining, through fairly stiff measures, coercive measures, this Kohinoor from the descendants of Ahmad Shah Abdali. And then when the British defeated the Sikhs, it came into the hands of the East India Company. And the Kohinoor became the property of Victoria. And in the early years, after the Sikhs were defeated, the Punjab was run by something called the Punjab Board on behalf of the British. That august body nearly lost one of its greatest prizes, the Kohinoor diamond, which had become the property of Queen Victoria. Receiving firm instructions from Dalhousie for its protection, the board had decided that the jewel would be safest in the custody of member John Lawrence. John was a tall, big, strong man. He was a member of the board. Afterwards, he became something like a governor of Punjab. So the board said कि कोहिनूर को बचाने के लिए इसकी जिम्मेदारी आपको देते हैं, आप संभालिएगा, ये क्वीन विक्टोरिया की प्रॉपर्टी. John Lawrence put the thing in his waistcoat pocket. When after some days Dalhousie, the Governor General who was in Calcutta, in those days Calcutta was the capital, Dalhousie sent word that the Queen wanted the Kohinoor sent to her. The board relayed the requisition to John Lawrence, who felt in his pocket, did not find the thing, and said nothing. Later that day, asked about it by his master, John Lawrence's servant said that he had indeed found a glass object in master's waistcoat and placed it in a tin box. Fortunately for the Queen, even more fortunately for John Lawrence and the entire board of Punjab, that glassy thing was still in that box.
That's very interesting. So, and then again talking about partition and the independence, you mentioned how the Radcliffe, the members of the commission could not agree. The two non-Muslim and the two Muslim members cancelled each other's recommendations, and perhaps that also informs what was to follow later. Even today in India and Pakistan, with the lack of basic agreement on very minor and basic issues. So how do you see the whole panning out of that summer of 1947, and how then it informs the behavior of these two states? I mean, going a bit forward.
Yes, thank you, Raza, very much. This inability to find a consensus in high-pressure situations. There is this well-known phrase, grace under pressure. But there's also a related thought of common sense and wisdom under stress and pressure. And it has to be recognized that in that very difficult time, the leadership of the subcontinent, and I would say the leadership in Punjab, within Punjab, the Muslim leaders, the Sikh leaders, the Hindu leaders, could not find a common sense response to these developing events. And this example was over the Radcliffe. We all think of the Radcliffe Commission. Radcliffe ने एक लाइन बना दी, लेकिन Radcliffe की लकीर इसलिए मशहूर है और इसलिए वो काबिल हुई क्योंकि जो और 4 जज थे, 2 मुसलमान, 1 हिंदू और 1 सिख जज थे. But these 4 judges could not at all agree. Each of them wrote a completely a verdict that was totally contradictory of the others. So these 4 Indian judges cancelled each other, and that's how Radcliffe drew his line. Now, related to this is something else that shows how in the 40s and even 30s, the Punjab leadership missed several opportunities. as you know, at that time, there was the Indian National Congress, there was the Muslim League, but the strongest party for some time in Punjab was the Unionist Party. Now, the Unionist Party had two very bad things about it. One, it was pro-feudals. वो जमींदारों की पार्टी थी. ये तो बहुत बुरी बात है. जमींदारों की पार्टी को हम कैसे, how can we really appreciate them? The second thing was, this was a pro-empire party.
Yeah.
Again, a very bad thing. हम तो आज़ादी चाहते हैं. How can we tolerate a pro-empire party? लेकिन यूनियनिस्ट पार्टी में एक बहुत बढ़िया चीज थी. ये मुसलमानों की भी पार्टी थी, हिंदुओं की भी पार्टी थी, सिखों की भी पार्टी थी. So it had two bad things, but it had one wonderful thing about it. But the Indian National Congress in Punjab was largely a party of Hindus. It was also a Shahri party. It had very little strength in the countryside of Punjab. लेकिन जो पंजाब के इंडियन नेशनल कांग्रेस के लीडर्स थे, वो चाहते थे कि जितने ज्यादा दुश्मन हमें मिले तो अच्छा है. हम मुस्लिम लीग से लड़ेंगे, हम अंग्रेजों से लड़ेंगे, हम यूनियनिस्ट पार्टी से लड़ेंगे, हम सिखों से लड़ेंगे. And when in 2 or 3 instances Gandhi tried to build some kind of connection with the Unionist party, he was opposed by two groups. एक तो progressives all over India said, we will never allow you to talk to the Unionists, landlords. और दूसरे पंजाब के हिंदू लीडर्स कांग्रेस ने कहा कि हम आपको फजली हुसैन साहब से, यूनियनिस्ट पार्टी के लीडर से बात नहीं करने देंगे, क्योंकि ये लोग तो चाहते हैं कि ये तो कुछ एफर्मेटिव एक्शन चाहते हैं कि यहाँ के कॉलेज में. पंजाब की पॉपुलेशन में 55-57% मुसलमान थे. लेकिन जब फजली हुसैन साहब सरकार में आए लाहौर में, तो पंजाब के कॉलेज और स्कूल में मुसलमान 10-15% भी नहीं थे. अब इन्होंने कहा कि गवर्नमेंट कॉलेज लाहौर में और मेडिकल कॉलेज लाहौर में कुछ रिजर्वेशन किया जाए कि मुसलमान स्टूडेंट्स भी भर्ती किए जाएं. तो पंजाब के हिंदू लीडर्स ने कहा हरगिज नहीं. सो दिस शॉर्ट साइटेडनेस, दिस रिफ्यूजल टू एक्सेप्ट दैट democracy आने वाली है, demographic realities should be recognized, was also part of the problem, which was a very important factor in the continuing polarization, alienation between the communities in Punjab. Sorry, I've given you a very long answer.
No, that was an excellent answer as always. But I just want to ask you that about these issues with history and the, some of the major sort of errors in judgment of the Indian National Congress. Is there a kind of a discourse in India where this is being recognized? Because, if you look at the mainstream understanding of the Indian view of independence and partition, it is Jinnah's fault, who's an evil character, who broke the United India, under a British conspiracy or whatever. And is there a sufficient understanding of these nuances of what Congress was, how it failed in the Punjab, or how it even could not negotiate with the Indian Muslim League and other representatives? So this breakdown of consensus of sorts that you've touched upon in the book.
No, thank you again for underlining this point. And the answer is that yes, some intellectuals, some historians do recognize the mistakes that were made. But I'm not sure that that recognition extends to common sense, rational approaches to present day problems, sadly. When you refer to Jinnah Sahib, it is worth recording that in the summer of 47, I mentioned that the violence started in March 47 and it began in the western part in Rawalpindi and Multan. Then slowly it went further east and covered the entire province. And of course, when eventually after August, the killings started, August, September, October, November, tremendous killings in East Punjab and also in West Punjab. But in June, I think it was, I can't find the page immediately, but in June of 47, when both sides had agreed, yes, there will be partition, there will be division, but some violence was taking place, Jinnah Sahib said in very strong language to the Viceroy that your police, your army should use all the force in its command. I don't care if many Muslims get shot, said Jinnah. You must stop the rioting. I want to mention this because many Indians don't know that this was
said by
attitude by Jinnah Sahib. And also, of course, we know how he wanted to protect the Hindus in Karachi, yes. And the refugees here. So these things are increasingly known to a wider section of the community, but whether they influence policy where it matters is another question.
Yeah, and my final question before we go to the audience, because I'm sure they have many questions and ideas to share. But what was happening? I mean, this breakdown of the administrative machinery in 47. The collapse of the steel frame to even sort of quell rioting or take effective police action, because new studies have shown that all the FIRs which were registered in 47, particularly in the Punjab, were never pursued by the police. So from March onwards, the police was doing nothing. Yeah. Sometimes what is happening in Pakistan as well, that no action is taken against. Was it a deliberate sort of giving up of the empire, or there was a crisis of leadership within the British government of the day?
I think the British authorities were focused on their return home. Somehow we now want to get home. We will not risk our lives or the lives of our officers, soldiers, some individuals apart. And there was the Punjab Boundary Force, which did some useful thing, but very, very minor in the larger scale of what was happening. But by and large, yes, they had abandoned. So when an empire retreats, very often terrible things take place. And this is indeed what happened. And of course, the empire also had Punjabi civil servants and police officers, both Muslim, Hindus, Sikhs also. But in that high-pressure period, the civil service officers, the Muslims and police officers, Muslims who were in East Punjab, they became focused on survival of their families and themselves. Hame wahan pahunch jana hai. That we have to protect all the Muslims of East Punjab, that was kind of, understandably, but that was kind of forgotten. Similarly, in West Punjab, there were Sikh and Hindu officers, civilian as well as police. They were focused on their transfer to the safer side, not on taking the threatened, vulnerable population across to the other side. This was one of the great tragedies. Lekin ek cheez main aur kehna chahunga. I mentioned, and to me this is the underreported story of 47, that many more Punjabis protected fellow Punjabis than killed fellow Punjabis. So in year 2005, my wife and I, we were in Lahore for a period, and we interviewed many people to find out कि आपकी families के लोगों को किसी ने और ने बचाया या आपके families के लोगों ने औरों को बचाया, and we collected some wonderful interviews. But we also collected some painful information in some of these interviews. And I want to just read 2 or 3 sentences from an interview that my wife and I had with a lady in Lahore. This was she was living in Thokar Niyaz Beg. Their family had originally belonged to Jalandhar. And I want to just read a few lines from this. In 1947, Sughra Rashid was a young wife and mother in Delhi. Her husband, Abdul Rashid, was a railway officer from a family hailing from the villages of Singhpura and Uggi near Jalandhar. The husband's brother was a young doctor, also Delhi-based. The husband's father lived in the railway colony in Jalandhar city. We asked Sughra Rashid for the names and ages of those who had been killed in August 47 in Jalandhar. Her answer was given clearly, calmly, and solemnly, and filled with brief pauses as she tried to remember. Some of her relatives were also present when we were asking these questions to her. And obviously, this question had not been specifically addressed earlier. It's almost the first time that she was being asked these questions. Kaun the jo mare gaye? Sughra Rashid answered as follows. Dr. Badruddin, the father of my husband, he was 60. Fatima, his mother, she was 55. Jamila, their newly married daughter, my husband's sister, she was 25. Tahira, their younger daughter, who was 22. Kutubuddin, my husband's nana, who was also my dada, he was 80. Idu, a mulazim. Idu's wife, Fateh. 5 children of Idu and Fateh. We were moved by this brief recreation through naming of the killed, and perhaps specially by the naming of the servants. Like the vast majority of the killed of 1947, the servants had lacked the means or critical contacts in the military or the police or the railways that had made escape possible for many of the better off, though not in this case for Sugra's relatives. Then she said, the family was living in a Hindu mohalla on the main road with only 2 Muslim homes. Amne Samne was a Hindu family who had said to my husband's family, don't go away. I remember 2 girls from that family, Sheila and Dhannu. I don't think the family could have been involved, Sugra added. I think they were helpless before the attackers. After recounting these events, Sugra said, Itna Jalandhar yaad aata hai. Jab koi Jalandhar ki baat karta hai, dil mein kuch ho jata hai.
That was indeed a very moving passage, Dr. Gandhi. I think I'd like to end and ask you, what do you see for the future? Is Punjabiyat, because you mentioned somewhere that after 47, the 2 Punjabs or the territories which are known as the Punjab have taken a different course, have taken a different identity. And is there sufficient common ground for future cooperation or that kind of lost amity? Or is it going to be now 2 separate different worlds at war with each other forever?
It's important to make a sound, objective prognosis or prediction. Yes, there is Punjabiyat. Yes, there is Bulle Shah, Waris Shah. Yes, there are the Sufis. Yes, there is the Punjabi language and the songs that are sung. And so many in Punjab, both sides, are aware of what's happening on the other side. But in these last 60 plus years, the children of Pakistani Punjab have been raised on completely different narratives and stories. Children of Indian Punjab, similarly, their concerns, their conversations are about completely different subjects. So we don't know how live the connection with the past is.
Yes.
But I think we should not underestimate the long-term power of what the Sufis did, what the poets did, what Guru Nanak did.
Yes.
I think Insaniyat and Punjabiyat are forces that are greatly threatened, that they're almost under siege. But I think it is too early to speak of their demise.
Thank you. On that hopeful note, we'll invite some questions from the audience. We'll take 3 as in one go. Okay, could you start from here? Yeah, aage se.
Thank you, for such a wonderful talk. But as a younger audience, we've been reading so many narratives about all the bad things that happened during this migration. And as an audience, I was wondering that, you've mentioned that when we look at all these atrocities that happened, a lot of good also came out. The number of Punjabis who were, positively helping the common man outnumbered the ones who were killing them. Then, a lot of people have gone out and they have actually chalked out narratives from all, with all that pain coming out. Can't we really look at something which shows the positive elements as well? Because as an audience, I'd like to see that positivity, which would then probably start mending those bridges that have broken.
Okay, next. अच्छा इधर दीजिए, इन्होंने हाथ सबसे पहले खड़ा किया था.
In Mr. Gandhi's book, there is a chapter, Insanity and Insaniyat, in which he has recounted a story of a Hindu who was saved by a Muslim. The Hindu was Mr. Prem Pandhi, a famous tennis player, and his life was saved by a Muslim, Mia Anwar Ali. He was the DIG police then. Well, I want to tell the audience this story is absolutely true because Mia Anwar Ali was my uncle and his daughter, Samina Akram Sayyed, who you have mentioned in the book, is my cousin. I heard this story as a child. In fact, this was very much a part of the family folklore. Right. So I want to thank Mr. Gandhi for telling this story.
Oh, that's such a nice comment. Acha, udhar dijiye, piche wo sahab, haan. Please keep it very quick. We are very short of time, and there are many people who want to ask these questions.
My question is that when was the first time the notion of democracy was introduced in the Indian subcontinent, and how did the people take it, because they were used to with the Badshahat kind of system?
Rajmohan ji, you take these three, if you just very quickly, and then we'll move on.
Well, I think the first question I'm very grateful for, which of course was wonderfully also responded to by the second person who intervened. I would only say this, that anyone who has heard any story from aunt, grandfather, grandmother about these wonderful gestures of support and protection should record those stories with as many details as possible. Kab, kahan, kaise. Because these stories of actual help rendered are so precious, and they are going to be very important for building the future. So I'm very glad that you mentioned this. So you and everybody else, whoever hears, and this is not true only of Punjab 47, but other tragic and terrible events, where also humanity has often played a good part, that those stories should be recorded and preserved and disseminated. That is my first comment. And thank you, of course, so much for reminding me of your connection.
And democracy.
On democracy, when it was first introduced in the subcontinent, in different places at different times by different people, but never always in such a way that it became the norm all across the subcontinent. And so, and various Mughal rulers in different ways, consulted some councils. In some cases they did not. Some were individualistic, arbitrary, autocratic, others were less so. So it's not always one or the other, but there are degrees of autocracy, there are degrees of democracy. And so, yes, so we have to learn from the fact that now Ranjit Singh's kingdom, after he died, collapsed completely because he had never set up a council to guide him. So nobody managed to protect the kingdom after he died. But there are other lessons like that this study seems to offer.
Okay, inko de dijiye. We'll come back to you.
Hello. You mentioned the role of Punjab in the creation of Pakistan. You didn't mention the role of Baniya mentality and Marwari mentality. That is important. Now it's also playing a role in India. That's mentality. What I imagine is the role of gravity is that plays the creation of Pakistan. The power of gravity.
Thank you. Shall we take a few more?
Yeah.
Okay. And could you please bring the mic here at the back? Yeah, de dijiye unko, de dijiye. Jaldi se.
Assalamu alaikum. I just wanted to ask you that the Britishers, as rulers of this area who spent 300 years in this area, did they do enough, if they did anything at all, to protect this massive, horrendous massacre that took place?
Thank you.
Thank you.
इधर दे दीजिए ये साहब जो हैं. हाँ. Please, very brief. Very brief.
Thank you very much. I'm a demographer. I have been teaching demography in Pakistan and US. And I go back to your comment that UP was not divided and Bengal and Punjab were divided, and they didn't look at the demography of that. I've been researching on a book on Muslim demography of India, undivided India. What happened that in 1947, when the subcontinent was divided, about 60% of the population of Punjab and Bengal, they were separated from India. Whether it was demand from the local people or it was desired by the politicians of India. What do you think that those riots, which you talk about, and in which about 1 million people were killed, just in Punjab, were they instigated by politicians?
Thank you. And we may take the... Yeah, इन्हीं को माइक दे दीजिए. मुख्तसर सा सवाल, please. Because यहाँ पे...
बहुत मुख्तसर सा. ये मैं पूछना चाहता हूँ कि गांधी साहब ने फरमाया था कि पंजाब महात्मा के असैसिनेशन में इन्वॉल्व थे. What about Gujarat?
Thank you. Rajmohan ji, you can take these few.
Well, I have been asked 8 very tough questions which I should answer in 2 minutes. मैं कैसे करूँ? तो एक तो मेरा आंसर ये है कि what I have said in the conversation with Raza and all of you just now is only a small part of the book. So some of your questions may find some answers, maybe not satisfactory answers, but some answers in the rest of the book. As for this very profoundly important question of who were behind the massacres, this again is not easy to answer. It is this much is true, as I have already mentioned, that the British had taken their hands off and they had said, "Ab to India ki Pakistan ki zimmedari." Secondly, there is this tragic evidence that in some cases, the large-scale massacres, trains were stopped and people were killed. The train with dead bodies became the symbol of the 47 riots. Yes. Some of these large-scale massacres were led by demobilized soldiers of the army. Yeah. They had the knowledge, they had the guns also, yeah. They had maps, they had railway timetables. तो ये भी था. अब इसके और ये दोनों जगह हुआ था. So some very influential people were undoubtedly involved. Now, after the killings acquired a great momentum shortly after August 1447, both sides agreed that our focus now will be on moving Muslims from East Punjab, Hindus and Sikhs from West Punjab, not on controlling law and order. It's very important. Both governments decided, उन्होंने हार मान ली थी कि अब ये हो रहा है, हम इन लोगों को अब किसी तरह से उधर भेज देंगे, but we can't control it. So there was this great sense of helplessness among the administrators. It was an acceptance of defeat. So on the role of Mahatma Gandhi in the killings in Gujarat, yes, it is indeed true that in Gandhi's Gujarat, those terrible things took place in 2002. तो अगर गांधी आपके सामने होते तो वो सिर्फ अपना सिर झुकाते और कुछ नहीं कहते. He would have accepted कि ये मेरी कमजोरी है कि हम नहीं कर पाए.
जबरदस्त जी.
I'm a student. My name is Sasi. मिंटू जी ने एक अफसाना लिखा था कि जेली के नाम से, जिसमें ये बताया गया था कि जब एलिट क्लास हिजरत करके वहाँ पर आती है फसादात के बाद, तो बच्चा वालिद को कहता है कि खून बिखरा होता है, कहता है पापा जेली. यहाँ पर ये हुआ कि मारवी वास्ती उनका इंटरव्यू हो रहा था, उन्होंने कहा कि जब बकरा ईद होती थी तो मैं खून से पेंटिंग्स बनाती थी. तो तब वो सवाल था कि अंग्रेज नहीं, यहाँ की नेशन यहाँ पर हुकूमत करनी चाहिए. अब यहीं की नेशन कर रही है और वो भी उसी ज़हनियत की है। अब ये बताएं कि मसला क्या है, नेशनलिटी का है कि अंग्रेज़ों से लेकर पाकिस्तानियों और हिंदुओं को यहाँ पर हुकूमत करनी चाहिए, हिंदुस्तानियों को अपने मुल्क में, या ये मसला है कि एक ऐसी क्लास आनी चाहिए कि जब हम दर्द से और डर के उठते हैं तो हम ख्वाब में खून देख के उठते हैं। तो जो हमारे एहसासात को समझते ही नहीं है, उनके हाथ में हमारी हुकूमत
पहुंच गई।
क्या होना
शुक्रिया।
चाहिए?
ये इधर दीजिए।
अब तो तीसरी पार्टी भी आ गई है कि तालिबान होने चाहिए।
उधर यहाँ कोने में ले जाइए, ये जो साहब हैं। और अब हम वी आर मूविंग टुवर्ड्स द राइट लाइक पाकिस्तान।
गांधी जी, आपने फरमाया कि कांग्रेस जो थी वो यूनियनिस्ट के साथ उनका कोई ताल्लुक नहीं था, लेकिन 1946 के इलेक्शन के बाद जो कोलिशन बनी पंजाब में, मुस्लिम लीग पार्टी जो थी वो बिगेस्ट पार्टी थी, तो कांग्रेस ने, अकाली दल ने और अपने यूनियनिस्टों ने बनाई हुकूमत, और उसी हुकूमत के खिलाफ फिर बड़ी मूवमेंट चली और वही मूवमेंट जो थी उसके बाद फिर राइट शुरू हुए। आपका क्या ख्याल है?
नहीं, आपने this is a very important point he has made, that although in the early years the Congress kept its distance from the Unionist Party, in 46 the Congress backed a small group of Unionists who had been elected to the Assembly, and the Sikhs also backed them, and the Muslim League, which had acquired the vast majority of Muslim seats in Punjab, which had the majority, not the majority of seats, it had the largest number of seats in the Assembly, was unable to form the government. At that time, too late in the day, there was some kind of marriage of convenience between the Congress and the Unionists. You are quite right in mentioning that. And the fact that the vast majority of Punjabi Muslims felt that their vote had been repudiated by this political alliance, this was a very major factor in what happened afterwards. Thank you for pointing that out.
Wonderful. ये माइक इधर दीजिए, ताज है सबके पीछे ये।
Sir, any childhood memories of that great champion of freedom, your grandfather?
So that's a very important question, but A, it is outside the scope of today's discussion, and B, I think we are perhaps beyond time already.
अच्छा, इधर दीजिए पीछे और माइक। हाँ, वो लेफ्ट पर।
पहले मैं एक छोटा सा वाक़ा सुनाता हूँ।
आई एम सॉरी, वक्त नहीं है। सवाल।
जब ये पार्टीशन हुआ, मेरी उम्र 14 बरस की थी और मैं अजमेर शरीफ में था। अच्छा। और मैं आपको ये रिकॉर्ड बताना चाहता हूँ कि एक माइग्रेंट सिंधी फैमिली, लखानी फैमिली ने मुझे, मेरी फैमिली को, मेरे वालिद, वालदा, हम 3 बच्चों को एक रात पूरी रखा और बिल्कुल पूरी तरह से हमें हिफाजत की। तो गुडविल इज देयर अमंग्स द पीपल। दूसरा मैं बताने की थोड़ी बात चाहता हूँ कि ये एक हिस्टोरिकल फैक्ट है। चौधरी जफरुल्लाह ने अपनी किताब में लिखा है कि जब पार्टीशन का वो कमीशन बना, उसमें जस्टिस महाजन इंडियन साइड से थे, जो बाद में इंडिया के चीफ जस्टिस बने, और हमारी तरफ से 2-3। उस वक्त एक जस्टिस महाजन ने यह कहा कि जब पूछा गया कि रावी रिवर जो है दैट इज द नेचुरल बाउंड्री, तो उस पर रेडक्लिफ ने कहा कि मैंने कैलकाटा जो है वो तुमको दे दिया है, एंड आई कांट गिव लाहौर नाउ टू यू। तो ये मेरा एक विजन था। मैं ही कहूँगा कि हमारे यहाँ एक उस दिन में लैक ऑफ विजन था। वी डिड नॉट हैव अ नेल्सन मंडेला एट दैट टाइम, नॉट द नेल्सन मंडेला ऑफ हु वाज इन प्रिजन, द नेल्सन मंडेला हु केम आउट ऑफ द प्रिजन।
जी, शुक्रिया। ये माइक उधर ले जाइए जरा। वो जो साहब है आखिर में, मे बी 2 more, ओके। इनको नहीं, ये आ गए। माइक आप ले लीजिए, बहुत देर से हाथ खड़ा कर रहे हैं।
Can I ask a question? I have a mic in my
hand. Okay, please, go ahead. But very quick, because you only have last 1 minute.
W.H. Auden ने अपनी पोइट्री ऑन माउंटबैटन में कंक्लूड किया है कि माउंटबैटन was complicit in the massacre of Punjab. And so much so that he's put words in Mountbatten's mouth saying that Mountbatten, that I will never return to India because somebody will shoot me. So do you think that it was a matter of policy that these massacres happened?
Okay. So I think Auden's poetry was about Radcliffe, not about Mountbatten, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it was Radcliffe.
Secondly, even if we agree that the entire massacre was something that some British individuals planned. हम इतने गधे थे कि हम we implemented that policy?
वही वाली बात. इधर जी कहिए जल्दी से.
एक सेंटेंस के 2 क्वेश्चंस हैं. एक
सवाल.
हिंदुस्तान सोशलिस्ट रिपब्लिकन एसोसिएशन को आप कहां प्लेस करते हैं इस पूरे जो है वो फिनोमेना में? नंबर 2, गुरु नानक जी से लेके आज तक पंजाब में डोमिनेटेड नैरेटिव एस्टेब्लिश्ड रिलीजन्स का क्यों रहा है?
ठीक है.
जो आपका पहला सवाल है उसका मैं पेज नंबर आपको दे दूंगा. मेरी किताब में 3-4 पेज हैं उस अच्छा about the Hindustan Socialist Republican Army. और दूसरा जो आपका है the power of religious influence and often the negative religious influence in Punjab. ये तो this is a well established fact and so it's a reality we have to contend with.
I'm really sorry to all the people who have raised their hands because we are totally short of time. Thank you for Mr. Gandhi. Can you please give him a really deserving applause for the book as well as all that he said. Thank you, Mr. Gandhi.
Thank you, Raza.